Now you're very welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown, and a call here with you in the company of Alan Morrison and Juco James, because we're going to be reviewing a very special game, and that is Celtic 2, Rangers 1. Celtic are the League Cup champions. Ange Postecoglou secures another trophy in his reign. Michael Beale's chat before the game didn't seem to get his team up for the match just as much as he would have liked. They came up a little bit short, according to Michael Beale after the game. But Celtic are the champions once again. Kyogo Furuhashi with a double in a League Cup final once again. Don't let anybody tell you that he's not a big game player anymore, because he absolutely is. He shows up on the occasion, and it was farcical to think that in the first place anyway. But that's beside the point. That's my angry man rant coming out strong in the early stages of this podcast. I don't know what's wrong with me, Alan. I'm coming out all guns blazing. I didn't expect to come out angry in this show, but I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of sticking it to Michael Beale. Just the frustration's finally coming out of me here at the start of this podcast. But look, we should be happy. This is a happy place this week.
Oh yeah, and in that regard, I would encourage you to keep your powder dry, because if you're going to get annoyed at every perceived idiotic thing that he says, you're going to burst a blood vessel in your head by the end of the week, because I promise you there's an awful lot more to come. This guy is going to be gold in the short time that he's going to be around. He's going to be absolutely golden. But listen, I mean, for me, before we get into the game itself, I guess it's really the context of it that's kind of one of the most important things to draw out, because the reality was that had we lost the game, it would have been incredibly frustrating and very, very annoying. But it wouldn't actually have fundamentally changed anything structurally around where the clubs are and really how things will move forward in Scotland. It would have been very irritating, as I say, and it would have been unbearable to listen to weeks and weeks of absolute pish about how brilliant Beale is and how he's got the measure of Ange, and how Cantwell and Raskin are going to rip up the league, and how that he's won this game, that Celtic of course they're catchable, and the treble's on for the heroes in blue. And it would have been all this. It would have been weeks of it. So I'm mainly relieved. I actually shared Ange's feelings at the end. It was more of a relief, actually, that we kind of spared all of this nonsense for the next few weeks more than anything. But as I say, the fundamentals wouldn't have changed. Celtic would still have had a better manager, a better squad, would still have had 50 million in the bank, and still would have had a very high probability of Champions League income next season to further sort of strengthen the club and hopefully the squad as well. So none of those things would have changed. But what it does mean psychologically, and psychologists are in the news today, as I saw, psychologically this is an enormously painful blow for those at Ibrox, because essentially that it's blocked off that feel-good narrative that would have prevailed for weeks on end. And also, I did say privately to a couple of friends that I did think that Beale is really, from day one, he's one cup defeat and one league defeat away from an absolute crisis. And I think we've seen from the outpourings and the outworkings of from the blue side in terms of their podcasts and social media, that this has had a huge psychologically damaging effect, because it's kind of emperor's new clothes now. The reality is dawning, and the reality that I talked about in terms of the structural advantages that Celtic have are now becoming even to those who, and let's be honest, you can't blame supporters at Ibrox for being ignorant to these things, because nobody in the media tells them. There's not a peep of it in the media about what the actual impact of revenue loss, of not progressing as far in Europe is, of their burgeoning wage bill, or the UEFA watch list and the impacts that's going to have on them. None of this stuff is allowed to be discussed, but I think it's starting to become reality in people's minds that that Beale is the start. Beale himself is the start of a downsizing exercise. You've got a rookie manager there in his 37th game. We shouldn't be too hard on Mickey. I mean, every man great. You think of every great manager that Celtic have had in recent times. They all started in humble beginnings with small clubs where they made mistakes and they learned their trade. He's chosen to be chucked into this cauldron because he walked away from Queen's Park Rangers, where he had a great environment where he could have grown and developed and made his mistakes a little bit more safely. But he's chosen this for himself. Ange Postecoglou, he's getting near 700 matches as a professional manager, and that's what the rookie was up against, and it's a hard school. It's a hard place to learn in that regard, and I think he's going to find that out over the next few weeks. So that to me was the important context, and I'm sure we'll enjoy getting to the game. And I'm just saying, enjoying asking James if he still thinks whether it's Beale the genius or the arrogant prick, which one is it?
Yeah. Well, before we get into the game, I just want to touch on one final theme after the game and how it felt in the two squads. And I know this is very easy to say after the fact that Celtic have won the trophy, but I think the fact remains that this is the mindset that I do feel that these players have. And it comes with a comment from Patrick McLaughlin talking about selling Juranovic and Giakoumakis, because there's two players that I'm going to mention in this that came in as replacements for those players. I think when you look at Celtic squad, and in that game, you had a team of winners, a team of absolute killers with a killer mindset that were ready for that game, that were charged up for that game in the right way, that they weren't going in, flying into tackles or whatever, but they knew what they needed to do because the framework is set there by Ange in the game plan, but they have the confidence to go out and be the dominant team. And Celtic were the dominant team in that game. They looked like the better team. They looked like the team that were winning the league by 9 points. I thought that Johnston was fantastic and brilliant in the way that he is, and fiery wee bollocks that he is at this point in time. He's so confident within the team. There was a moment at the end where O got the ball and just charged at Barisic and took him out and won a throw in just before the final whistle went. And he was immediately over to the fans to get the fans going again and get the fans going again. And then you had O'Reilly stepping up to the plate, Hatate stepping up, having a really good performance, Kyogo getting 2 goals again when it really mattered. I think this Celtic team is full of absolute winners. And that's the reason that they went on to win that game. And then you look at James Tavernier after the game, for example, just completely defeated in his mindset, in the way that they can't figure out why they're failing at the final furlong against Celtic. And if you bring you back to Ryan Jack last year, when Celtic were catching them after Giakoumakis' comments, he couldn't believe that Giakoumakis would say such a thing, that they were going to go on and win the league. I think the mindset at Celtic is completely different to what it is at Rangers. And I think that's the key thing that separates them, as well as, superior manager, superior game plan, superior players in many assets. I do think the mindset comes into it as well. But James, general thoughts on the game, I guess?
Well, I'll address Alan's comment first, because it segues right into what you just mentioned, Enda, which is that I was trying to think about how to characterize this, and I'm going to settle on something that will probably not be very kind given our audience, but you can Beale spent some time in Brazil, I think it was, or Argentina, I forget. I think it was Brazil.
Brazil,
yeah.
And youth players, to be fair.
Right. And I was thinking, you can take the British Neanderthal out of Britain, but you can't take the Neanderthal out of the British manager. And he went into that game as soon as you saw Lundstrom in midfield. We talked about it going into the last week in the preview show about using physicality in the midfield and roughing people up given the referee's track record. And by the way, we beat him up pretty good last week. Let's give him credit. I think Walsh did. I don't know if you guys agree. I mean, I thought he did.
I agree.
Yeah, on an absolute basis, it was a good refereeing performance. On a relative to what we were expecting, it was like probably the greatest ever of all time. So the fact that I didn't think he made any big mistakes, particularly any that would have hurt us. So the fact that he went with that midfield, I thought was not surprising, but kind of stereotypically British Neanderthal, which is you need that guy in the middle to rough up and and he didn't even do it. Like, that was the funny part. Like, they actually didn't even really play the way that you would think that they should, or I thought that they would try to attempt to, more physical and more niggly fouling. And it was completely incoherent relative to selection and how they ended up playing. So, talked about heading into the game that this would be, the big test would be kind of the chess match, one of the big tests. and I thought that was a pretty big failure on Beal's part. The other thing that I just thought was I had to confirm this on my rewatch. Is I thought I saw Tillman standing outside the box on a couple of their first half corners, and I think Tati's marking him. And they did change at halftime, but I think they had 3 or 4 corners were one of their best attacking aerial threats. Like, he's scored several goals this season on headers. Like, he's a taller guy. He can jump. He didn't have a particularly good game, but he was getting marked by a guy who's probably 5-6 inches shorter than him. And he's not even attacking the goal on corners. And then they pulled him out and then didn't use him. He's it's that kind of thing. It was just not a very well managed Rangers effort, as far as I could tell, and that was doubled with my rewatch, meaning that they really had some issues. So I thought that was kind of paramount to the outcome of the game, which is that our manager soundly won the chess game. So I thought I'd start there, given it. So definitely not on the genius scale, particularly on the day. So that would be my first comment.
Mm-hmm. Right, we'll get into like the specifics of the game and how we got on. From the outside, I'm going to let you guys do most of the talking. I've rewatched a certain amount of the game, but I haven't rewatched the full thing, so I'll let you take the lead. But I'm going to say that Carl Starfelt had a really good game, particularly early. Interested to see what you thought about that. In the midfield, a little bit loose in the second half, in particular when Rangers were getting on top. Iwata was brought on in the role that I thought he was going to be brought on in the Champions League, to come in and be a little bit of a controller. Thought he did that pretty well, not as well as you might have hoped. And then up front, I thought Kyogo was excellent, as well as Jota was very active getting into the middle as well. So, Alan, I know that you recognized a couple of major themes in this game that Celtic have been repeating, and one of them in particular is going forward, and that's the forward wingers getting involved very centrally these days in all that they do. So do you want to start there?
Yeah, I mean, I think to be fair, it was a bit mixed with the wingers, and I think, just in terms of, just to roll back to, let's think about the first half, how that kind of played out. As I say, I saw it being a sort of a short play in 3 acts, where the first act, as James said, is they set out like Motherwell would. And I was watching it thinking, this is exactly how Motherwell used to play against Celtic. They would push three up, who would do virtually no pressing. Either they didn't, or they weren't capable of it, which meant Celtic immediately played through that first press very easily. So now you're defending with 7 players. And then, it was from the first moment, the second minute of the game, I think the ball went out for a goal kick, and Alan McGregor took as long as he possibly could to get the ball back into play. And I just thought, this is wee guy mentality. This is wee team mentality that's going on here. That they're wasting time already. They're going long. They're basically, all they're doing is trying to land balls on top of Greg Taylor's head. This is exactly how every team we play in the SPFL plays week in, week out. And I thought, this has got to be embarrassing for them, because this is genuinely wee team thinking here. And the fact that they put in that midfield suggested to me it was a defensive move, because they were going for muscle and going for physical superiority, rather than thinking, how can we beat Celtic? How can we get them on the transition? So I just thought it was a very poor and very defensive and very sort of downbeat, view of the game that they took from the very outset. And then in the first sort of, I suppose, 20 minutes of the game, Celtic, they didn't create a lot, and mainly to your point about the wide players, is that the ball was on the left-hand side a lot. So where Hitati in particular was very effective was he basically isolated Tillman. And so Taylor and Hitati and Maeda were able to overrun, because Sakala was not ever going to track back. So they were able to isolate Tillman, and we got a lot of joy. Unfortunately, Maeda, every time he got the ball, was just horrendous on the ball. We'll talk about his off-the-ball performance later, because that's something else. But on the ball, he was very poor. And then they started to play a little bit better, and where they started to get some success in the middle of the first half was that they were obviously trying to play on the counter-attack, and they were trying to play long balls down our left-hand side, as every team does. And they managed to get Sakala on the ball 3 or 4 times in that middle of that first half, and they got into some really promising positions. But unfortunately, you know, he's somebody that looks like he does one good thing, gets into position, good first touch, and then the next thing he does is horrendous. You know, the second touch is bad, or he doesn't pick out the pass. So they butchered some promising situations in the middle of that sort of first half. And then at one point, they actually there's a great pass from Goldson, released Kent, and Kent had switched over, and Kent actually was one-on-one with Taylor. And I thought, oh God, this is going to be awful. And what Kent did is he suddenly turned into Jack Grealish. And he turned back, he ran sideways across the pitch, and then tried a shot from 35 yards with his wrong foot. And I thought, what are you doing? You had a one-on-one with Greg Taylor. And if you're Ryan Kent, I'm thinking this is your team's best chance of success here. So there was some dreadful wing play on both sides. I think Jota contributed an awful lot more than perhaps any of the other wingers. And then it just seemed like Celtic kind of ground them down towards the end of the first half. And the last sort of 8-10 minutes of that first half, it seemed to be, and I likened it to when we played in Celtic played in Europe, and I made the analogy that, you know, I made the point that here's a team, Celtic, who wants to press the opposition higher. They were trying to press. They weren't doing it very well, but they were trying to press. And when you're without the ball for 25% of the game, you can do that, and you can do it pretty much for 90 minutes. As we found out in Europe, when you've only got the ball, you know, when you were without the ball 60% of the time, then we struggled and we ran out of steam in these European games. And I thought the same thing happened to them. I think it was a combination of, you know, because at half time, Celtic had 65% possession, or I think even higher. They weren't used to chasing without the ball for that length of time. And for some reason, he chose to play 2 central midfielders who clearly weren't match fit. And I don't know why.
I was going to say, you could, Tillman and Ludstrom were really lugging. I mean, they were, yep, absolutely.
And so not only does that make me question his judgment tactically, I also wonder what the players in that dressing room who were fit are thinking about not being selected for players that clearly weren't fit. That's an extraordinary decision. And then to not do anything about it until you're 2 goals down was another really bad decision. So, you know, listen, rookie manager, we can't be too hard on the guy, but these were some really, really sort of poor decisions. But it took us, you know, we played in moments, and, you know, what you talked about there, James, it wasn't even the wingers that we were getting into play. It was when the midfield got close to each other in central areas, and one of them attacked the box. Although I think for the first goal it was Taylor, but Maeda, he inverted, he caused a bit of confusion. But both goals were really down to Connor Goldson being in the wrong place. He didn't cover his front post for either goal, and that cost them twice because he's obviously played with Tavernier for a long time, and I think he was trying to anticipate that Tavernier was going to get beaten, and he was trying to overcompensate, and he got caught out twice on that side. So yeah, first half we eventually got it right, got a reward, great time to score a goal, but yeah, their approach was almost kind of defeatist. I thought was a very strange approach to the game.
That's how I thought they were going to approach it, because that's what you do when you're the, you know, least good team on the day when it comes to a final. And one thing that I do want to point out is that when you look at really well coached sides, you start to see repetitive actions, and that's not to say that everything's choreographed. That's just to say that there are some things that are repetitive on the pitch, and you might see a goal that is scored, and you'll be like, "That's almost precisely the same goal that they scored 3 weeks ago," and it might not have been the same combination of players, but it was a similar way of going about things. Celtic's first goal, how many times have we seen them score or get a chance in the same manner as that goal? Because it was Moy that played the pass instead of Hatate this time, but that's Hatate and Greg Taylor's little move. The ball in between the right back and the centre back, in behind them, cross. It's usually to Maeda, actually, the Hatate to Maeda through the middle of the pitch, and Maeda tries to get across. This time it was Moy through the middle of Tavernier, and the centre back to Greg Taylor, who cut it across. Maeda made an absolute hames of it, but it fell to Kyogo nicely. And then that just shows you, James, that like while Rangers were approaching this game to, I don't know, be physical with Celtic, Celtic approached it as they have done with every other game in the season. And that is often the difference between the team that wins it and the team that doesn't, is who has the most consistency throughout the season. And Celtic were consistent in performance in this.
Yeah, when you're watching the game and you're nervous and emotional, and you get people around you yelling and screaming and stuff. I had I had family over, so my 76-year-old mother was all fired up and watching it with me. So and that's not the venue to have a calm, objective assessment of how the game went. And so when I went through my rewatch and kind of looked at it, I actually thought it was a relatively close game, meaning that if kind of the balance of play, given all the stuff that we're talking about, meaning that they pretty much blew it in some pretty big respects. Their manager did. I actually, to Alan's point, I didn't think some of our players played all out well. Again, the reason why I'm saying this is that the result kind of drives narrative, and the fact that it was such a great result, such a joyous occasion. I came out of the game thinking, man, McGregor played great. And then I went back and I was like, Jesus, I forgot about those two horrible mistakes he made, both of which almost led to goals. Right. And that's when Alan talked about weeks ago about, his infamous clip now about Tate. It's like, that's the kind of thing you just don't remember. Right. So people kind of remember it because it was right at the end of the game and they happened back to back, the two Starfelt blunders. Right. So it's those kind of that mental accounting that we don't go through. And, and I hadn't remembered, but, McGregor dove in on the wide left and got beat bad, which led to the shot from Kent and the rebound to Sakala. That was, not great. And then he had a really bad giveaway to same thing with Taylor. I mean, Taylor had some really bad plays in the game, including, that late foul on Cantwell and yellow card. And some bad giveaways. So, it's difficult to kind of decompose narrative and the emotion of all of it and the experience, and then kind of, again, go back to more of an objective analysis. So I actually don't think we played all that well. Overall, some players did on balance. Maeda being a great example of almost like a tale of two people, like a superhuman effort where he made some real material plays tracking back that masked some of the transition issues that we've had, and that we're still there. And a combination of him being heroic, Sakala being a complete bomb scare on the ball and wasting stuff, and Lundstrom being, a Neanderthal lump in the middle. So it was very much on the margins where you could see where things could have gone a little rougher. And fortunately they didn't. I think we can play a lot better than that. I do. And I don't think that they really created a lot of the issues for us. I just think it wasn't that good of a day for us. But, fortunately, when you put all this stuff into the mixer, it was relatively comfortable.
Well, I would add to that there's a certain level of tax you have to pay on your performance when it comes to finals, because finals are completely different to any other game you'll ever play. Like we say, we generally don't analyze cup games all that much because there's so much variance in them that it's almost impossible. You can, as it's the old cliche that the best result in a cup game is winning the game. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's getting the result. And that's what finals are. And that's why I bring up the goal that we scored in the first place, that it was still the same as what we usually do during the week. Everybody may not have had a 10 out of 10 performance, but there was still a consistent base there that was able to see Celtic through certain periods of the game and ride certain storms when Rangers were a little bit more dominant.
Absolutely. Yeah. My point was more so the fine margins, meaning that instead of Maeda completely fluffing it so bad that he misses it, that he balloons it over the bar, and Kent's instead of bouncing out of the post, bounces in and scores, right? So it was, in game state and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, we did what we do. I would argue not all that great on the day, but good enough. And they were so bad that, again, you net it all out and But actually, Alan, I was surprised because I looked at some of the stats based off of how we played it when we played them at the New Year, and they were pretty much in line, like percentage of long balls, and like they actually did play a lot pretty similar. And I think that also speaks to the fact that for the most part we were just kind of off on our day in at the New Year game because of what we're talking about with the illnesses potentially. My one question for you, Alan, is what was the relative packing score? Because I think that's going to probably tell a story too, as far as what it was a little closer than. That's my guess anyway.
Yeah, so overall in terms of team scores, which is probably a little bit abstract, so I'll kind of dive into it. But overall team score, which is everything all together, it was, and I've just lost it. Oh, it was about 404 to them, 514 to us. But what does that mean? So in terms of, let's talk about passing. So pack passing, you had Starfelt making an extraordinary number of pack passes, 29, and he did have the overall highest pass packing score. But virtually every single one of those passes was basically taking out the front three players because Sakala, Morelos could barely move his gut around the pitch. Kent's pretty hopeless at pressing. Sakala's awful at pressing. So it was so easy to play through that first initial press that Starfelt racked up a huge sort of packing score. In terms of more attacking passing, Alistair Johnson, who to me just quietly racks up great numbers every single game. He would probably be the next highest packing score, and Greg Taylor would be next after that. So the two fullbacks, because again they were trying to play quite narrow, so the fullbacks were generally kind of available. In terms of receiving the ball, so pack receives, Taylor was with the most. So we played down the left a lot. We played on Tillman, A being not great as a sort of defensive midfielder, and B not being that fit. So there was a lot of balls to Taylor that found its way. We got Hatate on the ball a lot. So again, it was down that left side. So Hatate was excellent in terms of he was great at finding these pockets of space, which is a skill that we know that he's got. We got Moy on the ball a fair amount, although I think Moy, to be honest, didn't look 100% fit to me either. So I kind of questioned why he played. And then in terms of turnovers and recoveries, so in terms of those that gave the ball away a lot, you mentioned Taylor. Both Taylor and Starfelt had absolutely brilliant first halves, both of them stellar first halves, and then they blotted their copybooks with some awful turnovers in that second half. Starfelt missing that cross that nearly allowed Kolak to score, and then that giveaway, seconds later. Taylor, as you said, gave the ball away, then had to commit a foul on the edge of the box to recover himself. So those two a few bad turnovers there, but then both Taylor and McGregor had they forced four from the opposition each, so that was pretty good on that side of it. So Maeda actually lost the ball, as I say, a lot, but it was generally very high and therefore not that impactful. He didn't, and then his recovery pace was so phenomenal. So yeah, that's the kind of story of the packing. I think if we want to look at the sort of the Rangers packing in terms of the most effective passer for them, if you just bear with me, because I've not got my glasses on, and it just seems quite far away to me. Pack passes, actually Kamara was the best for them, followed by Davies. Davies tried quite a few sort of long diagonals, which were quite effective. So Kamara and Davies I would say were the most effective in terms of passing. In terms of receiving, it was kind of slim pickings, really. They got Morelos actually on the ball in some good positions, but then it petered out there, really. And in terms of sort of turnovers and recoveries, Tillman was pretty wasteful, as we know, but that's, as you said before, James, that's one of his weaknesses, that he tends to kind of give the ball away, really. So nothing spectacular for them. They didn't really have anybody on the day that I would say individually put in a really great performance. On our side, it was mainly the fullbacks that were getting on the ball a lot, simply because it was so easy to get wide and play through that initial press.
Mm-hmm. Well, just I know this is a very scientific thing that I'm going to bring to the table here. The SPFL have released their Team of the Week, which includes the Viaplay Cup, and Kyogo Furuhashi is the only Celtic player in the starting 11 of the team of the week. So I guess that just shows you that Celtic were, as you know, as Mickey Beale says a lot, Celtic were just lucky in this game. You know, it was a pretty poor performance for everyone.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I do agree with James. It wasn't a great performance, and you're right as well, Enda, and that some of that is just down to the occasion. Celtic won the game relatively comfortably. Joe Hart did not make a single save in the game, and he barely touched the ball. Actually, he wasn't even having to kind of come for a lot of crosses or do much. Their crossing was really poor, so
Yeah.
it was comfortable mainly because of Beale's poor choices and poor management,
and the complete ineptness on the of of Morelos and Sakala. I mean,
I actually almost laughed when you
complete
said
train wreck in
Morelos
the
there,
final
like,
third. Yeah, I mean, it's just
embarrassingly bad. Like his career trajectory. Like there was a player in there at one point. There definitely was, but it's just like he's gained like 10 stone in the last 3 years. So that definitely doesn't help. Tom Brady is asking in the comments, what was the XG in the game overall? I know this doesn't really matter all that much because it's a once-off thing, but
yep. I had it as about 2.8 to Celtic, because remember the 2 goals that we scored were essentially tap-ins on the goal lines. They were incredible, and then we generated a lot of XG late in the game. We had 3 big chances.
Yeah, Jesus, Matt O'Reilly. Oh my God, broke my heart.
Yeah, well, Haksabanovic as well, straight clean through. Really, he did well. He cut in. He opened the goal up. McGregor did pretty well actually on that goal. On that, he narrowed the angle well.
Save, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he saved it, but he saved one well. But he forced Haksabanovic to aim
on
for
the
a
one
very
wide
narrow target on the one wide. He did well, McGregor. So 2.8 for Celtic and about 1.6 for them, because again they actually had quite a few shots from good positions in the middle of the box that got blocked. Now I overstate those. Now their XG as well. There's 2 shots in there which I hope if they'd gone in they would have been disallowed. There was one where Tillman clearly ran the ball out of play, knocked it back, and Lundstrom had a shot from the centre of the goal. And then the one that we talked about with Starfelt, where the ball dropped and then Kolak hit Kolak's arm. Now, generally speaking, that's always given as hand. Always be given as handball. If you get a shot away off the back of a handball, it's an automatic foul. So you'd like to think that that would have been disallowed, but who knows? So their XG number is probably a little bit inflated by a couple of good shots from good positions that probably shouldn't have been given. But that's the nature of VAR. You know, they basically just played on, and because nothing came of it.
Yeah. What about defensively then, James? I mean, there were a couple of occasions. The Sakala one where he hits the outside of the post. That's obviously a terrible miss. But I was just watching the extended highlights of the game. There was a couple of big moments where Rangers may have been in good positions, but again, Cameron Carter-Vickers was just so solid.
Yeah. CCV had the big clearance when you had, I think it was Morelos off his shoulder, but Tillman was behind him and had the ball work through. He probably had a tap in, assuming he was onside, which I don't know if he was. And yeah, I mean, Tillman had another time he got to the byline and cut it back right around the 12-yard spot. There was no one there. So again, they had a lot of relatively controlled possession in the final third, particularly with Sakala and Morelos and usual Kent. I mean, this is, Alan talks about toxic combinations, right? So those 3, when you put them 3 in an attacking forward line, none of which make good decisions and or are particularly good on the ball, it's not surprising that they have problems, really creating the amount of goal scoring that you would think they should, given, their advantages in the league from a resource perspective. And it's because, I mean, these guys just, we've talked about it repeatedly over the years with Kent. His decision making is poor, and Sakala, I mean, he just really struggles at once he gets
as a professional footballer.
It's just remarkable. So between those 2 things, this is why I say on the margins it's a slippery slope, because you get back to this issue of benchmarking and thinking about what does this mean going, longer term, back to Alan's, how he opened up. And I don't think the game really changed, as Alan said. I didn't think it was going to change much, and the way it kind of played out, I don't think it it wasn't some great Celtic performance that makes me think, oh God, this is like we're really charging here, and we're gonna, emerge onto the European scene next season. I mean, hopefully we do, and we make some changes over the summer, that kind of thing. But it wasn't based off of that, because you still saw a lot of the issues in transition. Them targeting our left side, pace issues. Taylor getting smoked down the side on a through ball in the channel and getting beaten for pace badly. Those kind of things that are just, we know they're issues, and they were evident, they were there. Just Rangers weren't good enough to really do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean,
but the dial was further. I mean, that the Motherwells don't even get into those positions, and Rangers get up and got into those positions and then just flush them down the toilet.
But to be fair, I don't think even a Motherwell defender wouldn't abandon his front post like Goldson did twice.
or Davey.
All I was going to add to that, Enda, is that James is right, but Celtic recovered the game when they brought Iwata on. And then watch out for that one, because although it wasn't a strict double pivot, it was kind of a double pivot. And Iwata didn't do much on the... Well, he did more in the attacking third on than he did. I mean, I said to my daughter, I was watching the game, and Iwata came on, because I was tearing my hair, what little hair I've got left, I was tearing it out, saying... Because Celtic just had an awful, awful spell between the 60th minute and around about the 80th minute, where we just couldn't keep the ball. And Iwata came on, I said to my daughter, I said, oh, brilliant. This guy will keep the ball. First thing he does, he boots it out of play. It's like, oh my God. Anyway, but just simply because he was very disciplined about his positioning, I think he improved things. But also I think it was helped by the fact they just seemed to not be that fit. They seemed to run out of steam, which is the very opposite of what happened last year in the Scottish Cup semi-final, where despite the fact they'd played every day for like a week and they'd gone into extra time, they suddenly found this energy in extra time that we didn't have. But that wasn't the case this time. But Iwata and McGregor together might be something to keep an eye on, as being something that maybe gets tried in a few more games, where maybe we just can see it out.
Yeah, I think that comes from the energy point of view, comes as much from the game swing and the momentum as anything else. I wouldn't say the margins are particularly much different between Celtic and Rangers when it comes to the fitness levels. But if you look at the way the game was going, they were pushing and pushing and pushing and just not able to break through at all. And then eventually, with about 10 minutes to left, Celtic start creating loads of chances again. You had the O'Reilly chance, 2 Haksabanovic chances. Abada had a chance where he went down looking for a penalty instead of taking it in. Got forward a couple of times. So I think it was more a mental block for them, that they were like, okay, we're not going to break it through. And then Celtic suddenly took control of the game and started doing what they usually do a little bit better. Than they sort of calmed down a little bit. They seemed a little bit nervous for about 10 minutes in the second half. Question from William, because I do want to touch on him, because he's my new favorite Celtic player, and that is Alistair Johnson. William says, can we talk about the shithousery that Alistair Johnson provides us? One of my favorite aspects of his game to begin with. And then he also adds, I think he's better defensively than Juranovic. Does the data point towards that early doors in what little we've seen of them so far?
Well, sorry, James. I'll just to say that he has passed the 900 minutes threshold. So watch out this week. I might do something on that exactly. But no, listen. Sneak preview is defensive stats. I'm going to compare his defensive stats to Lustig, because obviously Lustig was primarily a 6'2" right back, but could he also play centre back? And he profiled as much as a centre back as he did a full back. And I'm going to suggest that. What I'm wondering, and I haven't checked it out yet or done the analysis, is whether Johnston's got the defensive stats of a Lustig whilst having the attacking stats of I wouldn't say Kieran Tierney, but maybe somewhere close to that, or maybe a Juranovic. So it's going to be fascinating to look at. But I thought he was absolutely terrific. Again, what I like about him is that 2 things. One is he seems to get stronger as the game goes on. He just gets better and better and better as the game goes on, and stronger physically. And second is, you almost don't notice him sort of racking up. I mean, James will probably know that. I'm sure there's basketball players that you don't notice, and then suddenly you think, he's got 30 points. Where the hell did that come from? And he's a bit like one of those who just kind of racks up because he's such a consistent performer. I mean, I don't have an XS for expected shithousery, unfortunately. But I mean, in the first half, he was up against Kamara and Barisic, who, although they don't have a lot of pace, they're both big, strong, physical players, big, good athletes. And he was just bashing into them for fun. He had no problem at all. And Ken, he loved Ken. He actually had a hoot with him. Wasn't scared about showing him the outside. Take me on for pace if you want. And he had his measure pretty well. So I think he's a bit of a find, actually. I think early days, but let me do the proper analysis. But early signs are good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a absolutely huge fan of him. It's so easy to get behind him, especially when he's come in with just full confidence. That's what you want. You don't want a player coming in and being shy and scared of the jersey almost. He's come in, he's Celtic starting right back, and he acts like it, and he's completely embedded himself. I think if you watch some of the interviews and things that he's done with Alexa, Greg Taylor, or whoever, he seems to have integrated really well with the group of players, and that is something that you don't see as much. It's very hard to tell whether all these players actually get on behind the scenes, but it's very important for players to integrate within the squad socially as well. So, James, I mean, I guess you only wish that he was American rather than Canadian.
I love South Park, but I do love our northern neighbors. I throw one stat out that kind of amplifies Johnson so far. So his percentile. So again, StatsBomb has a metric for percentage success rate in tackles and defending against dribblers, oncoming dribblers, kind of one stat together, and he's in the 93rd percentile of his peer group. Now, again, it's 8 games, but that matches the eye test, right? And we saw that against Kent. So, I think the issues with him are more so theoretically, and again, I'm just to be balanced, how dynamic he is on the ball. So I think we'll still see about that. I mean, he definitely made some great passes, and it's there. But the consistency there and how creative he can be doesn't even need to be. That's the other part. We talk about in Europe needing, someone that's going to be that bedrock defensively. And that to me, that's always been the encouraging aspect of him, is that he, if there is a tilt, he's more tilted towards Europe as opposed to domestic, the game and how it fits. And I thought Juranovic maybe was the opposite of that as far as, how he fit. And we saw that with, some of the defensive challenges he had in the system. So in Europe, but yeah, very, very positive. And again, the nice part is you've got Ralston behind him. So
yeah,
people, he was out injured for quite some time, but tremendous backup as well. So
it's definitely good to see, and Juranovic is actually doing quite well for Union Berlin as well. So
I think he's playing wing back, left wing back. I think is most I've seen him. Yeah,
starting to get forward a little bit more for them. But I guess just to wrap this up, then that's Ange Postecoglou's 3rd trophy for Celtic, 2nd League Cup, league title last year as well, and 9 points clear at the top of the league this year, still in the Scottish Cup. Chance for the treble is definitely still on. 1 trophy confirmed already for this season. You'd be very confident Celtic going on to win the league at the point that they are at the minute, because they're 9 points clear with less than half the season to play. And today Ange was asked in the press conference, he was just chatting about general things about Celtic and that happens to be in the press conference, and he said that he is still here even though the people are trying to get him out the door, and he says, I think you'll be surprised at how long I'm here. I'm consumed by trying to make this club the best it can be, and I'll enjoy every minute of it. So I think the biggest anxiety point for most Celtic fans is not about any player anymore. It's about Ange Postecoglou and his future. That for me is definitely confirming 1 more year. I don't know if I'm willing to go and look much further than that.
Yeah, I think the anxiety is right. We've gone past the sort of year and a half, so I think anything can happen. So I trying to be sort of balanced, dispassionate. If you're if you're the CEO of a fairly major European club and you're looking at Celtic, you're sort of thinking, yeah, you've done well recruitment wise. You've shown that you can build a very coherent squad on a budget. In fact, you've made money in your transfer dealings and completely rebuilt the squad. So that's impressive. You've probably reduced the wage bill as well, so that would probably tick a box. And you also play attractive football, so that's good. And you won, but to be honest, I'd expect you to win, given Celtic's structural advantages. Europe first season was poor. Second season, there was some interesting play. You gave it a go. You were kind of a bit attacking, some might say naive, and you didn't win a game. So if I'm looking at it net as a CEO of a top European club, I'm kind of not sure. Right, that's just my honest opinion. Looking at it as objectively as I can. If he were to stay and Celtic made a right crack of it in Europe next year, whether that's getting out of the Champions League group and then either having a Europa League run or getting into the last 16, and the performances are strong throughout, and because it's clearly a very defined, well-organised team, which I think Celtic are and will continue to be so under Ange, then I think that'll start to turn a few more heads. Otherwise, at the moment, I'm sure he could go off and get another job, but I don't think it would be the sort of job that he would want to leave Celtic for. It would be like a sort of mid-table team, probably somebody facing a huge rebuild, maybe somebody facing a relegation battle in one of the sort of bigger leagues, perhaps. And I'm not sure that really floats his boat. At the moment, he's been given a huge degree of autonomy to shape the football club. He's been given a huge amount of independence and control over what happens. And that's another topic for another day, by the way, because I'm not necessarily saying that's the right way to go about it either. But I do believe, and this is maybe me straying into naivety a little bit, but I do believe that, and Ange will leave, sorry to break this to people, but he will leave one day. When that day comes, I fully expect that it will be in a way that the Celtic board are fully informed of what happens and are given some degree of ability to plan a bit of succession planning, and that it will hopefully be, it won't be something slipping out the door on a Tuesday night, as happened to a couple of managers ago. So I think it'll be signposted. It won't be maybe even halfway through the season. It might be at the end of the season that this will happen, and hopefully Celtic will be organised and forward thinking to be able to work around that. But it will happen one day.
Yeah, at some point. I don't think it'll be very soon, but I do think it will be even sooner than Ange maybe hints at there.
It's football, Enda. It's football.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Well, yeah. John Giles used to say that Jack Charlton would tell him that before he got into management, one of the main things that Jack Charlton told him was don't stay more than 5 years at a club, because at that point in time, not only has your stranglehold off the players and your authority over the players relaxed to the point where now you don't have as much as you did when you first come in. Your leeway with the board is also diminished to the point of no return after 5 years. That was Jack Charlton's advice, and I've watched many managers go past that, and many managers fail within a year and a half to 2 years after the 5 year mark. It's not an out-and-out science at a threshold, but 5 years is a long time to stay at a club. And
I would argue that given the intensity of modern football, that's now 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years exactly. Yeah. So I was going to say is about 3 years in. I would say 3 to 4 years is kind of more the threshold now. What my hopes is, and again, this is going to be a conversation for another day, really, in a grand scheme of things. But James, if you take Brighton as the example of where I would like Celtic to be at the point where Ange is leaving. Graham Potter, he left Brighton out of the blue, but Brighton had established a player trading model before that, where they're bringing in players to suit this system, and then they had a replacement coming in that suited the players that were already there. They weren't coming in and going for a manager that was going to reinvent everything that they were doing at the club. They were getting in a like-minded manager who's going to suit the players that are already there, so they didn't have to do this big rebuild. And it was a revolving thing. It wasn't a boom to bust model. So I think that's where we want Celtic to be before Ange leaves, is that the players are already there, and it's a like-for-like replacement with the manager in the same way that Johnston came in for Juranovic, and you don't even notice the difference.
So you are explicitly advocating for Kevin Muscat over John Kennedy. What kind of a scumbag are you? You are a scumbag.
And look, you know, like I don't know if there's been many people more harsh on John Kennedy than me in the last 2 to 3 years. But maybe John Kennedy is the guy. Maybe he is the guy after a couple of years under Irons that takes over, and is the manager. Maybe he is ready. I don't know.
Yeah. So to me, it's about whether or not Ange ends up building the institutional memory and culture that is going to persist after he leaves. We're not going to know until, you know, it's too late, so to speak. It seems like the board's making that bet. And, you know, to be fair, it sounds, as usual, it's probably one person that's been making that bet. People use the board as if it's more than just one person. But so, you know, I don't know. This is why, I mean, it was never a shock to me that, you know, Potter isn't the greatest thing since sliced bread, because again, the formula at places like Brentford and at Brighton, it's, you know, there's culture, there's intellectual firepower that's institutional. It's not one person. It's a system thing. And that's, you know, I don't think there's much evidence that Celtic have that yet. Hopefully Ange is building that. I'm still skeptical long-term, given that tends to be set from the top down, and given who's at the very top, probably would have a psychologist in to address things when you have an issue. Like he said, I think it was in September of 19 when he said our problem in Europe was psychological, not, you know, that we were having issues with, you know, in defensive transitions, for example, with an old midfield. None of those things. It was because, you know, we have psychological issues. So those kind of things you typically are top down, and that's not going to change anytime soon at Celtic. So hopefully, you know, Ange is able to carve out enough space, and he's able to kind of imprint that kind of culture and institutional memory. I think that's the hope we have at this point.
Yeah, big time. Mantis Toboggan MD coming in with if only Alex Ferguson had taken Big Jack's advice, as if Alex Ferguson isn't the exception to every rule when it comes to football management.
Well, you say that, right? But I was having this conversation with someone today. Alex Ferguson was manager. He was manager of East Stirling, right? He was manager of St Mirren. He did his apprenticeship. He did it in tough places.
Did he not also have a policy?
He built it, but
did he not also have a policy of churning his staff? Like he almost created his own.
Mm-hmm. He avoided himself getting churned by churning people around him, keeping the ideas fresh. Oh, it's a little bit like Ange bringing in Harry Kewell. Harry Kewell strikes me as being, I believe he is a pretty abrasive character, and so Ange knew that he was probably throwing somebody quite abrasive into. Because let's be honest, you know, John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan, even, you know, Darren O'Day, they're nice guys, right? You got to throw a bit of spice into the mix, and I think that's good management, actually. And so it'll be interesting to see if we get another bit of, you know, not a revolution, as you said, Enda, more of a evolution. But I think we do need to look at the whole structure and, you know, what's Mark Law's role going to be going forward? You know, who's going to be sitting above Ange setting that strategy? That's the key question in my mind.
Yeah. So in less big picture strategy sort of conversation, then we move back to reality when it comes to SPFL, and that is the team that everybody has modeled their game plan against, Celtic, and that is St Mirren. Can they get a result against Celtic this weekend? I'm going to say no.
We're going to find out, man. You know, smaller pitch and Robinson.
Only a yard. They might have shortened it again, but I believe, according to the records, it's only about a yard shorter on all sides. So.
Yeah. So it'll be probably another interesting battle. We'll see if he's consistent. Whether, you know, Robinson, whether he tweaks things. or whether he just goes with the same game plan. I mean, you would think he would just stick with it. I mean, it worked pretty well.
Well, they don't change. They play this 3-5-2 every game, no matter who they're playing.
Right. It's just how aggressive he is. He was a little more aggressive, ironically, at Celtic Park.
Yes.
So we'll see if he kind of goes back to bunkering again a little more. But yeah, it's probably not going to be a pleasant afternoon, even if we win 4-0. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be one of those days, I suspect.
Yeah, I think Celtic are going to win comfortably. I'm bringing the confidence of this league win into this game at the weekend. The manner that I don't know how enjoyable it is at the very top level that Celtic are at when it comes to winning these trophies, because the reality is these guys probably didn't celebrate for more than, you know, the 4 hours after the game that they had after the shower and the food, and then it was back to bed and then straight in. They probably got maybe half a day off the following day and then back in.
I think they got Monday off, I think.
Oh, they did.
Andrew
Okay.
made a big point. Andrew made a big point of that. He said actually at the end of the game, he said, if I don't let them celebrate, then mentally they're thinking, what's the point of winning anything? So, you know, they celebrate tonight. They got the day off on Monday and they're back in Tuesday.
Okay, well, that's good because I didn't hear that. So you made me look the right fool at the end of this podcast.
Not me. Again, it wasn't me. All your own doing, Enda.
Look, I think we've covered all bases. Yeah. I think we've covered all bases in terms of the final. So, any final points before we wrap up?
I did swither myself over who I thought the sort of boy of the match was, but Johnson, because Taylor and Starfelt at halftime, Hatate even, they were all kind of in the mix, but you just got to go with Kyogo, and the reason I picked him is what Callum McGregor said. He said, you know, the focus that Kyogo has and the discipline that he has to play the role he's asked to play, because I used to play as a striker, and you want to go and get the ball, you want to get involved, you want to get on the ball and run at people and all that sort of thing. He's very disciplined. He kept making those runs. He kept getting into positions between the sticks, and he got his reward. And it takes a lot of discipline to, because he had more shots at goal than he completed passes. So that he didn't touch the ball very much, hardly at all. But there he was. Never a doubt that he was going to get those 2 goals, and he looked the most dangerous. So that'd be my last word, I suppose, is that that Kyogo, I think, deserved boy of the match for me.
Yeah. Anything from you, James?
Ditto.
Yeah, big game player, absolute big game player, and he's going to be hard to replace if he ever leaves Celtic in the next couple of years. But we'll live in the moment, we'll enjoy them while we have. That's the main motto. My final point on the final before we wrap this up is that if you thought that it was a nervous game or you thought that Rangers were completely dominated, just go back and rewatch like half the game or the stretch in the final 20 minutes without the nerves and the emotion and the noise, and you'll come to realize that it actually wasn't that bad. I thought that it was very nerve-wracking at the time, but it wasn't all that bad. They didn't create all that much in the period that they were, quote unquote, the dominant team in the final. So that would be my main message to anybody watching and listening, and to those who were watching and listening live on YouTube. Thank you very much. Keep the comments coming. Like the video as well if you're in the comments, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe as well. It helps it grow and lets more people see the show as well. If you want to get the show in reverse, if you haven't caught it at the very start, you can get it on podcast, on iTunes and Spotify as well. We will be back next week with a review of the St. Mirren game, and hopefully that's a win too. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll chat to you later. Good luck.